Picture a veteran fire commander leading his crew into the back of a single-story suburban house. It looks like a standard kitchen fire. They deploy their hoses and aim at the flames, but the water has almost no effect. Suddenly, the commander is hit with an overwhelming sense of dread. He can't explain it, but he knows they need to leave immediately. He yells at his crew to drop the lines and get out of the building. Less than a minute after they step outside, the living room floor caves in. They had been standing directly above a massive hidden basement fire. When cognitive psychologist Gary Klein interviewed this commander years later to figure out how he made that call, the commander gave a perfectly serious answer. He believed he had extrasensory perception. Humans do not have ESP, but this leaves a very real biological mystery. How does a human brain know exactly what to do before the conscious mind even registers a thought? If you take a university course on decision-making, you are usually taught the rational choice model. You list your options, you weigh the pros and cons on a grid, you score the outcomes, and you pick the winner. This works fine if you are buying a car, but if you are trapped in a burning building, you do not have the time or the mental bandwidth to calculate a spreadsheet. When researchers actually went into the field to study veteran fireground commanders, they expected to find a faster version of that matrix. Instead, the commanders insisted they never made decisions at all, and they never compared options. If the people saving lives in the most extreme environments on Earth aren't comparing options, it suggests that our academic models are missing something vital about how the expert mind actually functions. To figure out what these experts were actually doing, researchers developed a field called naturalistic decision-making. They discovered that what we call intuition is actually rapid subconscious pattern matching. Take that fire commander. His brain wasn't psychic. It was detecting anomalies. Over decades of fighting fires, he learned what a kitchen fire sounds and feels like. But in this house, it was too quiet. The floor muffled the roar of the flames beneath them. It was also far too hot for a small room, and his water wasn't putting out the flames. His brain flagged these mismatches and triggered an alarm. This cognitive alarm system operates across entirely different disciplines. In 1991, during the Gulf War, the British destroyer HMS Gloucester was patrolling off the coast of Kuwait. An officer spotted a radar blip. He had only seconds to decide whether to shoot it down. The problem was, American A-6 jets and deadly Iraqi Silkworm missiles traveled at the exact same speed and looked identical on his radar screen. With zero objective data to tell them apart, he ordered the shot anyway. It was a silkworm. Later analysis revealed how he knew. The officer's brain had registered a tiny visual anomaly. The silkworm flew at 1,000 feet, while friendly jets flew at 3,000. Because the lower altitude masked the missile in ground clutter for a fraction of a second longer, it appeared on his screen slightly farther offshore than a jet would. This created a microscopic optical illusion of acceleration. He couldn't articulate the math in the moment. Reality deviated from a deeply learned pattern, and his brain screamed at him to act. So experience lets an expert recognize the situation. But how do they decide what to do about it without weighing a list of options? They use a strategy called satisficing. Instead of agonizing over the absolute best possible choice, they immediately search for the very first workable option. Consider an incident where a rescue lieutenant had to save a woman dangling perilously from the metal supports of a highway overpass. Using singular evaluation, he didn't brainstorm 5 different ideas. He thought of his most standard tool first, a snap-on rescue harness. But before issuing the order, he tested it using a process called mental simulation. He played a movie of the rescue in his head. He visualized attaching the harness, realized it required the victim to sit upright, and saw that shifting her weight might cause her to slide off the steel beam to her death. Because the harness failed in his imagination, he instantly discarded it. He moved to the next tool in his mental library, a ladder belt. He simulated buckling it from behind, tying a rope to it, and lifting her safely. It worked in his head, so he gave the order. Experts don't waste precious time comparing bad options in a spreadsheet. They pull standard reactions from their mental library and test them sequentially in their imagination until one survives. This flowchart illustrates the formal structure of this process, called the recognition primed decision model. At the top, you use intuition to recognize typical patterns. Then you move down to the second stage, using mental simulation to evaluate whether a specific action will actually work. This model provides a framework for training people in high-stakes fields. Researchers looked at nurses in a neonatal intensive care unit who could somehow tell when a premature infant was developing a deadly infection, often before blood tests confirmed it. The nurses claimed it was just intuition, but by running cognitive interviews, researchers broke that instinct down into specific physical cues. For example, adults get irritable when infected. Premature babies become lethargic. If an infant uncharacteristically stopped crying when lifted, it was a massive red flag. Expert intuition is a developed catalog of physical cues, specific indicators that can be documented and passed on to novices. To build a highly effective decision maker, you must move away from formal analytical spreadsheets. Instead, your training has to focus entirely on constant mental repetitions and rapid exposure to dozens of different patterns. As a senior developer at the Fire Academy once pointed out, to be a good fireground commander, you need to have a rich fantasy life. To make the right call when everything is on the line, you don't need more time. You need a deeply educated gut and an imagination sharp enough to see the future before it happens.